speaking of Salesforce, we've been talking a lot about them lately, mostly because I think they need to start thinking about changing their name because
Hmm.
they seem to increasingly become less and less of a CRM company and less of even a business app company and increasingly becoming a data company.
Their data
And
force. Yes.
they, yeah, and they double down on that again this week with the acquisition of a company whose name I can't stand, Own Company. It's just hard to say, for $1.9 billion. And what's interesting again is that they are fundamentally a data protection and data management company. Again, really sort of creating a very clear signal as to the direction I think, anyway, that Salesforce is going.
Yeah. The own company, again, yeah, awful name. Their their big product is continuous data protection, basically using change data capture capabilities to be able to understand any change happening at the data at any time. So you're not just taking hourly backups or even 15-minute backups. You literally get that change happening as it happens. So you basically have a time machine for any point in time for your Salesforce deployments. And they do have some other stuff as well. But for our own company, Salesforce really was the majority of the revenue. So Salesforce basically said, hey, this time machine capability is pretty cool and it's differentiated compared to, frankly, all the other companies that also do Salesforce backups, because obviously there are other companies that have been doing this over the past 2 decades. But this ability to be able to say, we have this time time-based way of looking at the data is possibly also useful from a machine learning and AI perspective, because now you have this way of being able to go back in time and being able to look at all of these trends that are happening in your data, all these changes that are happening, they're all being captured. So now you can do AI stuff based on that. And so I think this is going to be a really interesting acquisition at the end of the day, because it lets Salesforce do a little bit more work with the changes in data that happen. And it doesn't hurt that own company has a former Salesforce product person who was in charge of own company and obviously is coming back into the fold. They thought they had escaped, but Salesforce brought him back.
I think what is interesting about this from a couple of perspectives. First of all, I agree with you. I think that the data element of it and feeding into the future growth of AI, and machine learning models is interesting. But what this also speaks to, and this is something that I think we've hit on a few times, but it's easy to get lost. I mean, I joke that we should be called This Week in Enterprise AI because it's like that's all we end up talking about. It feels like. But this is just a reminder that most of the world of enterprise IT is blocking and tackling. It's dealing with the day-to-day activities of just keeping things running and moving. And part of my frustration with all the talk around AI is how difficult it is for most IT organizations to operationalize it when we're still struggling with just so many of the kind of basic things like data backup and data continuity. And so this is an example of Salesforce, I think, smartly saying, "Hey, this is a place that the more we can bring this integrated approach to it together makes a lot of sense." And going back to what I was just talking about, where I think the future challenges for the Anthropic and the Open AIs are, is that Salesforce is in a perfect position if they, kind of like the whole thing that we talked about last week still doesn't make quite sense to me. But if they get their head on straight around how they're approaching AI and really go down this road, like they had that research that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, um, they're in the position where suddenly AI just becomes infused into all these other application layers that they already have that people are using on a day-to-day basis. And clearly Salesforce is already going that direction, right? And
Mhm.
if they can completely execute on that, that becomes a real threat because at some point, from my standpoint, you sit and say, why am I going to be wasting my time trying to figure out how to bring in an Anthropic or an OpenAI or an SSI into the fold when somebody who is already one of my primary systems of record or multiple potentially systems of record, and it's being baked into everything I'm doing, and it has all these other layers of data management and all the stuff that I need to make AI work sort of baked into it. I think that becomes the fight. And I think that we're going to see more and more of this sort of which way do we go play out. And I think that the only thing right now that is saving the open AIs and the Anthropics of the world is it takes so much money to go down that road today that it's
Mhm.
difficult for a company, like, well, anyone. I mean, I think Salesforce is there where they can invest in it, but almost anybody else cannot. And that's the thing, that's that barrier that is protecting the current AI players. But I think that the world is going to be coming down to it's the blocking and tackling and the infusion of AI, and that bodes well for a way the game that Salesforce is playing.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting though that AI has become so expensive that either you need to raise $1 billion or you literally need to be Salesforce or Microsoft, one of these companies that is used to spending, call it 20 or $30 billion in an acquisition, and now they've basically pushed that money into AI instead for the past couple of years. That honestly where the money's coming from. Salesforce isn't buying another Slack or Tableau or MuleSoft right now. They are literally pouring that money back into AI, and that's the resources that it takes to be a real player here. Uh, yeah, absolutely.